Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the High Noon Hot Seat brought to you by High Noon Productions. I am your host, The Blevins, and today I am joined by the host of the Esports Roundtable podcast and Esports' first dedicated executive search consultant, Joe Hills. What's up, man? Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much, dude. We're looking forward to coming on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. And just a little bit of background for everyone that doesn't know, we had a little bit of an maybe not an interesting way that we met, but an interesting for at least in my case esports that we met. We actually met on LinkedIn. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, the world of esports podcasting is relatively small. So it's always quite interesting to see what everyone's doing. I think I reached out to you just to say hi and just, you know, understand what it was that you guys were doing,
Yeah.
what the vision for it was. And yeah, now we're here, and I think you're probably going to jump on mine in the future. But yeah, it's super exciting. I mean, the timing of this is really interesting because
Yeah.
I'm actually about to fly out to Los Angeles in the next few hours and watching my first game of Overwatch live at the
Yeah.
studio in like 2 days. So I'm at the maximum level of hype for Overwatch at the moment.
Yeah, I'm so jealous. You have no idea how jealous I am as I'm wearing my New York Excelsior hat right now. But
Oh, you scumbag! It's all about the Outlaws, baby. Come
oh,
on.
get out. Well, okay, hold on. I'm not. We're not playing against each other
Okay.
in the stage again. We XL already won. I'm back on the same team again. Okay, we're a different
Okay.
division. It's. I'm not. I have no
Uh,
qualms with Outlaws right now until we play again.
that's
Um,
fair.
but yeah, I just thought it's interesting because it's like, oh, we met in Twitch chat or like, I saw something, but no, it was LinkedIn of all places. So
Yeah.
it's always cool. And it's going to be a little bit of a different interview than maybe my viewers are used to. Maybe the old time viewers. We had some esports business, but we haven't had esports business talk in a while. And as the OG fans know of me, I'm super interested in the business of esports and the business side, uh, just because I think it's just very fascinating. Like, you can watch games and analysis and whatnot ad nauseum, but there's not a ton of people doing the business side, and it's just very interesting to me. So we'll definitely be focusing more on that, and then also I'm sure if you want, you can fanboy out about the Outlaws. It's okay. I've got some audio clips for the Outlaws if they need be, but. Enough about that. Let's talk about you first, Joe. We always like to start off the round or the hot seats with getting to know you and what's your gaming and esports origin story.
Sure. So I have been excessively competitive at pretty much every game I've played since
Hmm.
the age of 6 or 7. I don't have any brothers or sisters, so growing up, clans and playing competitive competitively was a massive thing for me.
Hmm.
I remember playing on the MSN gaming network for Age of Empires 2 using
Yep.
dial-up, being
Yep.
like 2 hours into a game, and then your grandma calls your mum on the
Yep.
phone, and then all the progress is gone.
Yep.
I kind of spent a lot of my time on PC. My family PC was awful, but it was just about strong enough to run the Orange box.
Hmm.
So Dave Defeat Source, uh, Counter Strike Source, and all of the really obscure mods that kind of spun
Yep.
out around that
Yep.
was my life for about 5 or 6 years. I used to spend hours on Day of Defeat on all of the orange maps, just kind of flick shotting
Hmm.
with the sniper rifles.
Hmm.
And then my parents' PC blew up, so I got an Xbox. That's probably through using far too much LimeWire, but I hope the feds don't shut me down for
The
that.
old days.
So I moved on to console, started playing a lot more RPGs and lots of a Bad Company too. The
Hmm.
kind of peak of my esports player career was winning a headset on game battles for COD 2 when I was about 14. My voice was
Nice.
still really, really squeaky, so I got kicked off the team like 2 weeks later. But that's the illustrious heights that I've climbed to. And then stepping into esports was a complete it wasn't part of my plan at all. Really, I mean, everyone who's a hardcore gamer looks back and thinks, oh, one day I'm going to be a games tester or I'm going to make games. And
Yep.
one of the big things that I talk about at the moment is just the lack of education around the wealth of opportunity in the games industry, which hopefully we'll get into slightly later. But I was working with an executive search firm in London. Executive search is like senior leadership team recruitment. So like the heads of department and above, really, based on how large the company is. So I was at this firm in London, was getting some really nice exposure to pretty much all industries because I was one of the few researchers in my team. And then one day I'm sat at my desk feeling slightly disenfranchised after like 3 years of being in the same job and not really sure where I was going to go. And then out of nowhere, Walter Schleifers from Fnatic asks my boss if he wants to join his network on LinkedIn. Now, my boss has no gaming understanding at all. And if you're in recruitment, people are reaching out to you quite a lot. So the probability of one, me being in the office, two, me having my headphones out, so I actually heard him say what he was about to say, and three, that he thought it was relevant enough to say this, but it just boggled my mind. But my boss said, what the F is esports? And at that time, Fnatic's Counter-Strike team were absolutely god tier, like untouchable, and I basically just fell out of my seat, completely babbled with a ridiculous amount of enthusiasm, and we ended up winning a role for the head of business development for that team. We placed that in a few months, and that was really like the moment where the spark hit the tinderbox for me. I started learning all about the business side, where it come from, all the way back to Fatality and Quake and winning the car and like $50,000 and like how it moved forward, the kind of failures of CGS, why was esports interesting for brands? Why didn't we have the brands yet? Blah, 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 blah. And then so if you fast forward 3.5 years later, I left that organization the end of 2016 and set up my own organization, which is Looking for Group. So we specialize in all of the endemic executive search piece. So we work with teams. We've been working with Riot for like 3.5 years. Still haven't worked with Blizzard yet, but with a bunch of startups, with ESL, DreamHack, really closely tied in with Infinite and the Optic team with the Houston Outlaws, a bunch of brands from outside. So that's what I've been doing for the last few years. And yeah, I'm absolutely loving it so far. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a really great opportunity to really kind of grow esports into a more, I don't know if legitimate is the right word, but it's the first word, more of a legitimate business model, especially for people looking in on the outside. It's like the biggest thing for me and like for the podcast has been like, I want people to not think that it's just a bunch of kids playing in like one hotel room or like in their mom's basement. And it's like, yeah, it's actually like a very diverse and sophisticated business ecosystem. So yeah, that's really awesome. Let's move on and actually kind of segue right into, the legitimacy of esports and specifically Overwatch League here. We had the exclusive third party exclusive rights deal with Overwatch League and Twitch for reportedly $90 million. I don't know if that's public or what was reported. So
yeah,
but I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that, Joe. What are the implications of that? The impact of that? Is this, a good thing, bad thing, indifferent? What are your thoughts on that whole Twitch exclusive deal with Overwatch League?
Well, it's a really interesting litmus test for how far the industry has come. You're starting to see a lot of these exclusive partnerships. You've got the 90 million for the first few years with Twitch and the Overwatch League. You've got the Faceit partnership with YouTube, which has a really interesting integration with their loot crate drops in the stream for all of the in-game items. One of the less successful ones that's only just started in the last few days is the ESL, a Facebook partnership with Dota, which had a peak of like 7,000 viewers and a low of 2,000. And there are some pretty obscure FGC regional tournaments that will do better than that. So it's a really interesting time for the industry to be scaling in this direction. If you look at how sport is monetized, naming rights and media rights for the broadcasters is where the biggest deals are done, and we're only really just starting to see that. We had the BAMTech deal with Riot a few years back, which still hasn't materialized into anything. That's supposed to be like an alternative streaming experience, which adds a lot of value, so you can get maybe some different angles, some extra content, but it would involve some form of integrated advertising. The biggest business hurdle for esports is how to actually make esports fans start spending their money. Everything is free. So we've got to find interesting ways that you can actually add value to the experience, be that some really exciting stuff with merch or like loot boxes with like regular bits of team affiliated merchandise or experiences. That's kind of the direction that the space is moving in, and I think that it's very good for competition between the platforms as well. Like if it's just Twitch being the go-to for every esport, then there's no friction, there's no energy for them to continue to innovate. Whereas Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch all have a slightly different way of doing things, which I think is just going to elevate the quality of the broadcast and actually the quality of the fan experience too. So that's ultimately what we all want, right? Is we want no pauses in game. We want like awesome casters. We want really interesting or funny advertising, if there has to be some, so that it's not it doesn't seem like someone's stuffing a brand down your throat. It has to speak the esports language. So these kind of deals actually help that to happen.
Yeah, and I think the Twitch deal makes a lot of sense, but I wanted to transition into one that I'm torn on, and I'm really curious to get your thoughts on this. We have Toyota as a sponsor for Overwatch League.
Sure.
And okay, that's great. We're getting a mainstream brand, non-endemic brand, investing and sponsoring Overwatch League, which is awesome. Don't get me wrong. I'm super happy. Any money that's going towards Overwatch League, I'm happy with. But on the other hand, like you said, it almost feels like it's just like it's stuffing it down our throats with no added value or anything. We haven't seen anything yet. I mean, maybe we're gonna see a Tracer themed Toyota car come out and it's gonna be awesome. But it's like, is this helping or hurting? I want to get your thoughts on this. Like, is it a good thing to see like the official plum flavored juice of Overwatch League? It's like, what does that even make sense? It's like, okay, yes, they're paying and sponsoring Overwatch League, but it's not like you said, it's not speaking the language of esports. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. So if you just take one back step for a second, if you look at how the two franchise leagues have made progress so far, I would say that the Overwatch League is doing a fantastic job of actually bringing in these league-wide partnerships that actually help the teams to fund esports, which is exceptionally expensive. If we can't start to bring in these kind of partnerships that actually bring in revenue for the teams and also increase the experience of the fan, then esports might not reach its area of potential and the investment might pull out. So even though we're still experimenting with brands stepping in, I do think that every major brand that steps in is always bringing value, even if it's not, even if it's a little bit forced in the first instance. An amazing example of this that I've seen was Mercedes-Benz did a partnership with ESL Hamburg late last year, and they actually did a really good job with it. You know, there was the Mercedes brand was all over the player desks. They sponsored like the player of the tournament. Each of the teams got a Mercedes that kind of like took them around the city with their team branding, and because the message was, you know, nothing's better than their E-Class, blah 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 blah
Yeah.
blah. The casters, the fans, Twitter, Reddit embraced it as just a meme, and then it actually blew up on social media. And seeing the Mercedes-Benz Twitter account saying it was great to be at ESL Hamburg, but nothing's better than the E-Class, blah 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 blah, with like a slight wink. You know,
Yeah.
that is amazing.
Yeah.
Even we have to be able to make these brands feel welcome, and you have to, like, when you're building a partnership like this. I think a lot of esports teams and organizations might pitch, you know, this is our social media reach, this is the eyes on, this is what you can buy. And I think it's smarter from a business perspective to really understand what's that brand's message, what's their philosophy, you know, what are their ideals, and how can you maximize partnership, how can you maximize and actually collaborate on their positive message that they're looking to push. There are a bunch of sports brands that are really keen to help elevate the state of kind of youth sport and performance, and inspire the next generations to kind of do more and rise above where they're at. And I think that's awesome. And one thing that we might touch on later on is, as the esports pyramid, you know, not just at uber pro level, but as the semi-pro, amateur, casual, as that infrastructure gets expanded upon, then the kind of the positive social impact that these kind of partnerships can have in the reach into schools, into underprivileged areas. You know, there are lots of these projects that can't be done unless we start partnering with these organizations. So it is definitely going to be the way forward. One last thing that I'll say on this as well is looking at Counter-Strike, for example. You know, that's a really hard esport to bring in non-endemic sponsors from,
Right?
Because obviously of the blood and the storyline behind it. That's why Overwatch is so good, because it's actually really accessible to people of all backgrounds. And it's you know, it's not, you know, throwing stories of bombs and terrorists in your face.
Right.
The way that I see Counter-Strike actually being able to become more successful and attracting the same interest as Overwatch League and League of Legends is the kind of more follow the angle of where the UFC's been moving. You know, that is a sports proposition which lauds itself on people dropping elbows on people's faces, or like breaking their arms, or choking people unconscious. You kind of have to go to those organizations that are already not desensitized, but are already happy to speak to the kind of red-blooded younger male audience.
Right.
It's,
Don't pitch the headshotting terrorist to grandma, because it's unlikely. It's more likely that little Jimmy down the road is going to like Counter-Strike more than grandma. I get that for sure. The one thing I'm just like, I agree with everything you said. The one thing I'm just like almost worried about is like, I don't know why I use this as the example, but like, I don't want to see like the official cottage cheese of Overwatch League. It's like, what is that doing? And like, it almost like completely misses the selling point of esports. And you touched on this, is like, and I tell this to people all the time, it's like, if you want to just get like viewership and numbers and stuff, like go fund like any other sport right now. Like there's a lot. I mean, we'll talk about the numbers in a
It's pretty
second, but
expensive to do that though with sport, you know,
yeah,
like that's why esport and some other extreme sports are a great option for fans because they're
yeah,
speaking to a completely new audience, you know.
exactly.
The
And
the age base
hmm
for fans is for sports fans is only getting bigger. That's why the NFL's push to include more women viewers has been a massive success because that's just a entire 50% of of the population that a lot of sports and entertainment properties completely ignore. So I understand why brands are really excited about getting into esports, and I think it's always going to be a learning process. You know,
yeah,
we've only really seen the industry be in its current state where we're actually getting this kind of attention for the last 2 years, and a lot of these people that are working in these organizations, they understand esports on paper, maybe. But I can almost guarantee that none of those people have been in the trenches, you know,
right,
smashed their keyboard after they lagged out in a MOBA and then they
yep,
threw the game or yeah, they never really they don't really call themselves a part of the community.
right,
So it really is on the onus of those inside the industry to educate themselves on what the brands expect, speak their language, and then find some form of harmonization. You know, if you just slap a logo on someone's shirt, that doesn't help anyone. You know, that's just
right,
oh cool, that's a you know a various hardware company. That's great. Doesn't make me want to buy it more. Doesn't really add anything to the team. So
right,
having like an organic experience where or event or content or whatever it is that gives a personal experience or an emotion to the fans, you know, that's where these brands are really gonna succeed. So I completely agree with you. Like the official blah 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 of Overwatch League
yep.
doesn't really add any value unless there's extra effort around it. But you know, I'll take some free cottage cheese. I'm not too fussed.
Yeah, I mean, I will sell out for
Cottage
the
cheese.
small, yeah, for literally cottage cheese. That's why I keep bringing it up, is because I secretly just want some free cottage cheese. But enough about me selling out. Let's move on. We touched a little bit on viewership, and opening night of Overwatch League saw there was a lot of different reports. I saw something that said there was like 10 million, which okay, I'm throwing that one. I'm throwing that one out because I just don't believe it. I don't even know where they're getting their numbers from. So, but the numbers that I saw that were at least slightly more credible was across multiple platforms. I saw like peak of like 400K, and I think average around 250 or so thousand for opening night, and it's kind of petered out to around 100 to 150 in the subsequent weeks. So, you know, this was a huge investment and effort on the side of Blizzard and Overwatch League and a lot of the people buying in. Like, in your opinion, Joe, has this paid off? Is this the payoff that they're expecting? Like, is this a good start? Is this a flop? What are your thoughts on the viewership for Overwatch League?
I was really impressed with the overall level of production uh, for the games. The viewership on the first day or the first week is still pretty strong. You can always expect that drop off in week two. Uh, it's very hard to pass judgment on anything that's only just started. So I'll kind of hold off from saying whether it's been a success or a failure until we get slightly further into the season. But from a structural perspective, I think it's 4 times 5 weeks or 5 times 4 weeks, right? Like that's how the season is split up. With those kind of breaks, I think that's a lot more sustainable for the players and also for the fans. Like
Yeah.
you see with League of Legends, especially, the splits are so damn long that you know you've seen everyone play each other a lot, and you've seen the same builds, and you've seen like the same strategies.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to over saturate your fans with a lot of playing content. And I think with Overwatch still having a relatively narrow pool of heroes, that Yeah, I've been impressed. I've been impressed. I mean, when the Overwatch League was first brought out, I was very
Mm-hmm.
skeptical, along with a lot of other people. There's no revenue sharing for the teams until 2021. They've hoovered up a massive amount of investment
Mm-hmm.
that could have otherwise been put into other areas of the industry.
Sure.
Um, I mean, this year is always going to be lots of experimentation, and maybe I'm taking a super long-term view, but
Mm-hmm.
the real value that I see from the Overwatch League is when the teams start going back to their local towns,
Mm-hmm.
to their local areas, and that really galvanizing the local and regional esports communities
Mm-hmm.
like around those teams. We've gone global first, and that's because esports was born on the internet, and
Mm-hmm.
that's amazing. But I think to really give this industry some roots and to help a lot of players and fans that might spend a lot of time on their own, even if they're playing games with friends, bring them together.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favourite experiences in this industry was I was down in London for the start of the EULCS last year, and it was the first and only viewing party for League of Legends that Fnatic had done at their pop-up shop,
Mm-hmm.
which is the Bunker, and that was amazing. That was one of the first times outside of like a major event that I'd sat down with people. Me and random people were just buying each other beers and just
Mm-hmm.
having a chat, talking mad smack about how painful solo queue is, and that was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's still a pretty unexplored part of this wonderful thing that we call esports. So that's where I really see the massive value for for the league.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be, I think, a turning point once they actually go back. I'm interested to see because it it's not necessarily the case that all the teams are going to handle it the same way, and in fact, they almost certainly won't handle it the same way. So, I'm hoping that it's kind of like the opposite of the parts are the sum of the parts is greater or whatever it is. They're actually going from being a whole and going separately and kind of also still acting as a whole. So it'll be interesting to see if like the 12th ranked team is actually going to be able to do anything. I mean, maybe you wouldn't necessarily think that they would based on other sport and the fact that like random Major League Baseball teams don't necessarily do great. So it'll definitely be interesting. I'm obviously super excited because I want to actually go to the games. There's
Of
just
course.
people, especially people not in esports, they like don't get it. And I understand that, but the thing is like you go and watch any esport. I watched the StarCraft finals at BlizzCon this year, and I haven't watched StarCraft in years. I don't particularly care about anything in StarCraft, but that is like the most hype stage you can possibly imagine. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if you understand and appreciate competition at a high level, and the hype is there. So it'll definitely give people who aren't necessarily following the different esports specifically. It'll give them a chance to really appreciate what they're actually bringing to the table.
Yeah, what I'm loving to see as well is, those teams that have slots quite close together, how
Hmm.
how they're competing for their states,
Hmm.
just for like 100% uh, openness.
Hmm.
LFG is invested in by Infinite Esports and
Hmm.
Entertainment, which controls or has a controlling investment in Optic Gaming and the
Hmm.
Houston Outlaws and that entire organization. So I'm actually recording this from Texas at the moment. When I've been going over to meet the guys. I've met Hector and
Hmm.
Optic J and all of the guys behind Infinite,
Hmm.
um, and the events the company put on a viewing party for the last Outlaws game
Hmm.
last week with about 3 or 4 days notice, and 600 people
Yeah.
turned up. It's incredible.
Yeah.
There is nothing like this in the UK, especially.
Hmm.
Just seeing how fast this industry is moving forward over here It makes me really excited. Really excited. I think that the US is definitely going to show us the way with how strong you can actually have esports influence all levels of of society. Really, you know, there is yeah. I mean, gaming is an experience that is level and equal for everyone. It's what brings us together. It's the joy, if it's single player games, if it's that driving competitiveness. You know, gaming brings all of these different walks of life onto a level playing field, and I think that as a force for social change, we've seen it with sport. I think exactly the same thing can happen with esports. So I'm very excited, not just for the play, not just for the business side, but just to see how far the like tendrils of influence can just inspire kids or young adults just around the world.
Yeah, for 100% agree with you there. And you mentioned that there's really not anything in the UK that's kind of like what we saw with these viewing parties and with Overwatch League. And right now, obviously, we only have technically one European team in the London Spitfire that is a full Korean roster owned by an American company. So they're European by name only, really. So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on maybe the future of EU teams buying into Overwatch League and investing in that and popping up. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. So European esports versus the North American market has like one very obvious obstacle, which is slowing everything down, is that North America is a single language market. Every piece of content you produce has the maximum ceiling to reach not just everyone in North America, but the English speaking population of the world. To build a business in esports in Europe is a lot harder. You've got 20 different languages being spoken, if not more. You've got, if you want to be a truly international business, there is completely different legislation across all of these different countries. So the short-term, like local community that you can speak to is always quite limited. Also, I think maybe the brands in Europe are actually more willing to step into esports, but for whatever reason, the investment money isn't as enthusiastic for a lot of these teams. Perhaps we will see Overwatch League EU buy-in increase after 2019, because that's when the EU LCS is going to franchise with League of Legends. So perhaps that will put down a framework where a lot of investment money will actually see that this has a lot of potential. I mean, I had Roman Bijard, who was the League of Legends manager for Unicorns of Love. He now manages the Optic League of Legends team. On my podcast last week, and there was an article that went out about it on Esports Insider yesterday. Roman said that Unicorns of Love was an amazing experience, but the freedom that he has with Optic versus Unicorns in terms of just how far every bit of content that he comes up with, or every activation with the players, or the ideas that they come up with as a team, they've just got so much more to play with, and they've got so much more to action afterwards. It's a really night and day between North America and the EU. So, I mean, I'm actually quite active in the UK outside of just the executive search piece. There is a national esports tournament that's going on between 20 schools in the UK. It's the second year that it's been rolling out, and this was put out by Yuki, which is the NGO that is responsible for looking after the games industry. I'm actually a coach for one of the schools. It's 3 versus 3 Overwatch. The only reason why it's 3 versus 3 is because putting Overwatch ready PCs into a lot of schools
Right.
in the UK is pretty
Yeah.
expensive. But this is just the second year that this sort of stuff is happening. We're starting to see the varsity side in the UK really
Hmm.
start to step up. I actually hired in the head of esports for an organization called Benchmark Sport, which acquired the media rights, which we were talking about earlier,
Hmm.
for all of the varsity esport competition in the UK. The just the momentum that we have over there is it's starting to rise, but it's a long way off. So
Hmm.
I'm not quite sure when we'll see more EU buy-in. But
Hmm.
from speaking with Code Red Esports and Red Eye, who's a
Hmm.
massive esports personality
Hmm.
from mostly from a Counter Strike and Dota, but they have a mission for really pushing the amateur, semi-pro and pro Overwatch scene in the UK,
Hmm.
and their aim is to have homegrown talent in their team within 2 years, either via their contenders team or just raising someone up. So
Hmm.
I completely understand why. Like people would say, it's an all Korean roster. It's not even European,
Hmm.
but it's just so much risk in the first year that you.
Yeah.
I understand why so many teams are going big on these teams just to
Hmm.
make sure that like winning is the most important thing for a business in esports.
Right.
It increases the reach of your organization and makes you more attractive to sponsors. So making like proving or starting your legacy by smashing it in the first year,
Hmm.
like our Spitfire has been doing, is it's a smart business move. But I can understand why the community is a bit confused or a bit
Right.
annoyed by it.
Yeah, I think most of the arguments and stuff that such that I've heard are just kind of just rabble rousing for the sake of doing it. It's like just
Oh yeah.
like you don't see anyone say that about either Japanese or Dominican Republic players playing on the New York Yankees. Like it's just such an old like it's just such a dead horse that I hope I don't expect it to happen this season, but I'm hoping in the next couple of seasons, like people just stop. Like there's nothing inherent about people from a certain country that makes them better or worse. It's like it's just it it's kind of it's getting very annoying for me to keep hearing, but
Unless they're from Korea because they put something in the water over
right,
there,
there's something in
obviously.
the water in Korea for sure. But you know what? I'll let Reddit be Reddit because
Yeah,
there's
that's
some
fair.
good things that come out of it. But there's a lot of things you talked about in that last piece there. The franchise model and also building up amateur and even casual scenes for games. And I'm kind of curious on your thoughts on, we're seeing obviously Overwatch League is the franchise model. We're seeing League of Legends go to a franchise model. We're even seeing like NBA 2K leagues come up with a different like localized franchise model. I want to get your thoughts kind of high level on is the franchise model the way to go, and then also what does that do for the lower tier tournament scene is and
Mm.
these non like what does it do to the uh rogues of the world, the Hammers esports of the world, these tier 2 tier 3 whatever you want to call them esports organizations that don't have slots in these huge leagues, like what happens to them and also the amateur tournament scenes.
Sure. So the immediate TLDR is that I think franchising is dope. I think that if you look at just the turnover of organizations in some of the older esport, if you look at League of Legends, how many new teams came and gone in the last three or 4 years. The same with Counter Strike and Dota. Franchising provides this kind of level of consistency for organizations to actually fail safely, either with rosters or for ways
Hmm.
to approach the industry.
Hmm.
And I think that stability, that permanency is really important for the education of brands and those outside of the space, because if you've constantly got new team owners that are don't have a proven track record kind of flying around at the top of the space, it just might scare off a lot of the interest. At the same time, I completely understand the concern for what's going to happen to these lower level organizations. That's why stuff like the Contender Series, the academies, all of that sort of stuff. That's why I think that's really important. And it's not like these other parts of the industry that are, say, lower down, if that's the wording that you want to use.
Well, they're not worth hundreds of millions of dollars, I guess.
Yeah, but well, that's true. But I don't actually think that they're underserviced. You know, there are some amazing tournament organizers out there, like Battlefy, Smash GG, as well as a bunch of others that I just can't remember at the moment. But there are loads of organizations that are specializing in making sure that if you want to play esports at the lower level, at semi-pro, if you just want to play with your friends at the weekend in like a casual league where you could laugh about getting stomped afterwards, but you still want to get that kind of itch for competition, then that's great. And there are going to be multiple places for you to do this. And you know, that's what, like I said earlier, that's what I really want to see. I want to see a clear path to pro, just like there is in sport. You know, if you have talent within football, basketball, wrestling, you know, if you get identified early, there is a full ecosystem of coaches, training programs, managers, mentors, which is really important, and the lack of something that we have in esports just because it's so young. But there is a multi-step process where if you can hack it, if you can keep performing and actually stay in school, then you can fly, and you can maybe find yourself in the NFL or wherever your dream is. At the moment, we don't have that in esports, and I think there's a massive drive in, and I speak to a lot of organizations and companies that are really focusing in on this. So the work is being done, and I think that we're going to be seeing lower level organizations and the other areas of the industry start to flourish in the next few years. Not to bring things back to Optic again, but one of the companies that Infinite has invested in is an organization called Triggerfish. Their business model is basically bringing sales and partnerships in for the rest of the esports holding company. But a massive, massive part of that is working as representatives and agents for a ton of lower level organizations. So if you're smaller Overwatch team, if you're smaller Counter-Strike team, you know, if you can't reach these sponsors, there are other ways for you to partner up with very favorable deals for you to start getting sponsors, for you to be able to maybe buy some players, maybe buy that editor that you need, or to, you know, I don't know, spend some cash to invest in it. So I don't think these low level organizations are being left behind. But it's always going to happen that most of the investment and the attention is going to be focused on that kind of top 5% of the industry and player base in the business. That's just that with something this hype, that's just always going to be where the focus is on. But I don't think these other places are being left behind.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's good to hear that too, because like it's almost like a lot of the organizations and companies that helped build, especially like in Overwatch, like that helped build up the scene at the beginning. It's nice to think that they may still have a place in the ecosystem afterwards. I kind of want to shift the focus a little bit, less of the macro esports and more about kind of the players here.
Sure.
The biggest thing this week, and really been for quite some time now, is XQC from the Dallas Fuel, who is your rival team. I'm sure you're familiar with him. The TLDR, and I won't go too much into it because it's been talked about ad nauseum. He made inappropriate comments on his Twitch stream, got banned or got a suspension and a fine from Overwatch League, and then Dallas Fuel decided to extend that suspension for the entirety of the first stage of Overwatch League. That's the biggest thing right now. And then there's been, even like last night, there was some stuff with inappropriate things being done on camera on stage. So my question here is like, how does, like, you don't really see this happen in traditional sports as much, and if you do, it's a huge deal, and there's huge fines, and like people like Terrell Owens don't end up playing on teams, even though he's a fantastic player. And even with the NFL in the past, 5-10 years has really started to crack down on this like outside of game nonsense, really. Especially with esports and even specifically Overwatch League being so new, like, do the organizations and the teams and really the players need to take an even bigger step forward to push professionalism in the industry and in the sport, or does that lead to esports losing its kind of charm and the fact that it's such a young audience and a young player base?
I don't think that these kind of scandalous events damage the industry as a whole, because there is going to be friction with people the world over, regardless of what context it's in. I'm not validating anything that XQC said. Actually, I think it's pretty disgusting, especially if you look at how Muma actually carries himself. He doesn't want to be the champion for LGBTQ in esports. His tweet after this happened was absolutely amazing. There was none of his management was involved in this. This was purely from his heart. It's like, I just want to play the game. I don't want to and that regardless of whether he asks people not to mention it, every single interview he's going to be asked about this.
Yep.
How does it feel to be the only openly gay player in Overwatch League and perhaps wider esports as well? And I mean, for me, this really opens a door to a pretty under-discussed topic in esports, which is just the massive skewing towards a white male, maybe not player base, because that's a lot more even, but in terms of how that's represented at the professional level in business and also in pro play, it's really something that I think that gaming specifically can have a massive impact in. The toxicity of Twitch chat, sometimes, not all the time, but if you see Shocks from League of Legends, or if you see Zoe on from Overwatch League, you'll see a lot of the comments are going to be like, oh, she looks hot today, or not based on her performance. And this kind of goes back to something that I was saying earlier, which is that gaming unites everyone. It's a level playing field. Everyone has the ability to go in and play. I've seen some amazing stories of some people with some really serious disabilities that have been able to find an escape or be themselves online through like some really interesting pieces of equipment. And I think that the stories and the experiences that we get by stepping into another world, that is a massive force for social change. And I think that these kind of actions and these events, like what this guy was saying, I'm not sure if one like that kind of short-term ban is enough. If I was in control of an organization, what my organization stood for in terms of values, I think is the only thing that's more important than performance in games. So I think the onus is really either on the Overwatch League or on the teams themselves to really put that first.
Right.
I would not have that person play again. And we've seen very long-term bans in a bunch of other sports for years, and they come back and they've reformed. Tyler One has made his illustrious return to Twitch after being toxic AF. So yeah, these actions need pretty strong ramifications. I think the industry as a whole needs someone or a group of individuals to really step up to the plate and address this, so that we can really use esports as a community. We can be a source of hope in a political climate which is potentially quite depressing.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of leads kind of into the next topic I want to talk about with the players is right now, especially in Overwatch League, and I'm not familiar. You can correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't think that there's any sort of players union for League of Legends or Counter Strike or really in
Riot
esports.
opened one up.
Okay.
They said that this is something that they want players to do, but they left it with the complete onus on the players to get it organised and
Right.
to elect a representative. I think Riot might have put one in place because the players just weren't interested.
Yeah.
But I think I kind of get the angle of where your question is going. Is
Hmm.
are these important? Do we need these? And I think the answer is yes. We've seen in other sports, the performers can be completely manipulated,
Hmm.
and taken advantage of. And ultimately, without the players, there is no esport, there is no sport. I'm a massive fan of mixed martial arts, and there have been several attempts for a player union
Hmm.
to come in, and it's always failed, for whatever reason.
Hmm.
And the kind of contracts that these fighters are on, and the risks that they put out there for their body and their
Hmm.
mental well-being, for the low amount of pay that they get, and the kind of gamesmanship that the organizations play with people's livelihoods.
Hmm.
It's very dangerous. One of the things I have seen in pro sport where there isn't a player union is these kind of player summits, either
Hmm.
within an organization itself. So say if you have multiple esports teams, or like a pan esports, or
Yep.
an Overwatch League or League of Legends player summit, have a really open forum for players to voice their concerns, or to
Hmm.
have a few topics that you think we should be moving forward on, like diversity and acceptance in esports.
Hmm.
Um, these are kind of like the first next steps. It's really hard to change the world overnight.
Right.
I think that baby steps when approaching either the previous topic that we were speaking about, or player unions and player representation. You know, baby steps is better than those steps.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. It just even like so I agree the XQC thing awful. What he said was awful. Even how he handled himself afterwards
Yeah,
for the
he was
most part is
toxic. He was
awful.
toxic like
Yeah.
hours after, right? Yeah.
Right. It's like you're pub like my whole opinion of it is when you sign that contract, you put on that, Dallas Fuel or New York Excelsior or Houston Outlaws jersey, you are going like regardless of anything, you are going to be representing that team and that organization in Overwatch League wherever you are. Even if you're walking down the street, like people know who you are, dude. Like you're representing the organization. When I played high school basketball, like we had very stern conversations about like you can't go out to dinner and dine and ditch because you're representing the team, you're representing the
Sure.
school, you're representing your family at all times. It doesn't matter like if you're at a restaurant, like you're in public, and like there's no excuse for Twitch chat, like it's literally meant to be public. But on the other hand, like and he's a bad example of it, but like the players are kind of on their own in a way. Like obviously the organizations and the teams are looking out for their players, but not like there's some part of that there's like it's almost like a conflict of interest. They're butting heads in some ways because like the well-being of the team is not necessarily, and the well-being of Overwatch League is not necessarily always going to be in the player's interest. I think Overwatch League has done a decent job of trying to get that as one of their core philosophies, but it's not always
Mm.
going to be the case. So I really think that like on both sides of it, like the players unions are going to be there to benefit the players, but also to have a code of conduct that all the players like. It's one thing to be yelled at by your boss, it's another thing to be yelled at by your peers and coworkers and like,
Yeah.
hey dude, you're making us all look bad. It's not just you, it's not just the team, it's all of us. So I
Yeah,
think,
there's a double-edged sword with Overwatch being such a fresh esport.
yeah.
From one positive side, this is the first time that a lot of these players are getting in the spotlight, and that
Hmm.
means that they've seen well, I assume that they've seen what esports has been beforehand, and they really appreciate the
Hmm.
kind of scale that it's at. To go back to the Outlaws again, I think that Jake and the guys handled themselves fantastically
Hmm.
well. They are
Hmm.
some of the most professional, grounded,
Hmm.
motivated players that I've spoken to in my 5 years in the industry. And that's fantastic. The con is that Overwatch is so new and they're so fresh
Hmm.
that no one's got any experience, which means
Right.
that you're going to have these kind of personalities that, for skill, might get into the public eye, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of onus on organisations to do some media training to
Hmm.
put some perspective into these players and make them really appreciate where they are. The amount of time that I speak with um, GMs and managers from teams in older esports like
Hmm.
Dota, League of Legends, Counter Strike, and the amount of drama and like divas that they have to deal with because people have like been around for the last 6 or 7 years and
Hmm.
have this entitled attitude and they're just there for the
Hmm.
money. I'm staggered by it because this is like working in this industry or being a pro player. It's the best job in the world.
Yeah.
It is the best job in the world. And yeah, the hours are hard, but you need to like there needs to be some way to continue to remind players of that perspective
Hmm.
that every kid that plays games has dreamt of this at one
Yep.
moment. The kind of looming decisions of adult life have made a lot of gamers question, oh man, I wish I could this just seems like so much effort. I really wished I didn't have to go and do that. I wish
Yeah.
I could stay in this world forever, and
Hmm.
and and it's been a massive tool for so many gamers to get over their own personal situation. I started the story with I was an only child. Gaming was a fantastic way for me to like socialize with
Hmm.
people and to like find out the person I wanted to be.
Hmm.
And it was also an escape during the harder times of being a teenager, which I'm
Hmm.
sure that everyone goes through. Um, Taking stock of that and taking stock of that and your time in the spotlight, not just from a performance and business side, but from a philosophical and
Hmm.
emotionally intelligent perspective, I think is what if players can do that, then they're going to look back on these years
Hmm.
with ultimate joy. The last thing that I want is anyone who's a performer or a competitive athlete like these kids are is to look back with massive regrets.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's just my heartwarming rant.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's yeah.
we definitely got to get those in as well. But we're we're quickly running out of time here, Joe. So I'm gonna leave it to one last topic here, and it is admittedly a big one and one that I think people have been talking about since esports has really became a thing at all, and people are going to be talking about for quite some time. And it's esports and television.
Yeah.
It's almost like on the one hand, like TV is the big thing. It's like the mecca of media broadcasts, right? But on the other hand, it's the old way, and I think a lot of people, especially a lot of kids that are younger than us, young enough to be our kids, they're watching a lot more Minecraft YouTube videos than Saturday morning cartoons. So I just want to get your thoughts, maybe at a high level. What are your thoughts on the future of esports and television?
It's a really good question, and I think that the answer is obviously going to change with time.
Hmm.
But the E-League and other bits of like a TV sports content
Hmm.
via BT Sport and the BBC with Edge Infinity or League of Legends, there's a few European examples. Those things are great
Hmm.
as just enabling esports to be regarded at the next level by
Hmm.
people that don't understand it. I think that esports still needs TV in
Hmm.
the short term, maybe not as a major form of where all the viewership goes,
Hmm.
but definitely as a component for broadcast and
Hmm.
also to learn, how to structure a tier one production. However, the viewing numbers on TV for these esports broadcasts that are also streamed is dismal. So I think long term TV, as TV starts to die, which is already happening with the future homeowners, and I don't even know what they even call the generations now. Is it Z? Has it gone? Has it gone back to A yet? I'm not
Yeah,
even
I don't
sure.
know. I have no idea.
Um,
You're like, what are
but
our grandchildren? What generation are them? I have no idea.
I don't know. I don't even know. But like our generation and below, uh, it's everyone's switching off. Everyone's using ad blocker. That's why
Yeah.
everyone's super keen to get into esports. It's integrated advertising. I think TV will need esports more than esports needs TV in the next 3 or 5 years. I would love for TV or esports and TV to be big, but I just don't really think it's that important. It started online, it will always be online. There is one weakness with that, though, and that's been a topic which has reared its ugly head every year since the Bush administration, and that's net neutrality. It is the single biggest potential disruptor of this industry. I mean, I struggle to actually follow the narrative these days about whether this is actually happening or not. But there's been various repeals, and I think that the FGC's vote was turned over. And I see some New York statesman putting an executive order to uphold it yesterday. So I'm still not quite sure how it's going to play out. And I think the fact that US policy on this influencing the rest of the world, I think, is frankly disgusting. But that but by being all online, moving away from TV, there's a potential that esports could be in a very, very, very different format than it is at the moment in a few years if this situation continues to move forward. But TLDR is, I think, TV is a great bolt-on for esports, but will never be the focus.
For sure. I agree with that 100%. I think it's cool and flashy now, and I think what it will do is it will legitimize esports for people who don't see it as legitimate at all, which is, that's fine, but it's not going to, it being on TV isn't going to sway people like you and I and younger children like TV. Okay, well, we haven't had one of those in our house. What's that? Is that an app for the computer?
No one's going to be scrolling through and see esports and think, oh, yeah. But the click-through rate on that is insanely low. I mean, one of my first roles one of the first jobs that I was working on after I left my last organization and started looking for group was working with Jinx TV, which is a TV channel in the UK invested in by Sky and ITV, which is like channel number 3 on the old, what was it called? Digital analog, yeah. Analog thing on the old analog system.
Yeah, I don't even know.
When everything was in black and white and there were no engines.
Back in my day, it was steam powered. Yeah.
Yeah, so those two channels invested in Jinx to make an esports play on TV, and it just has not worked. They have hired new people on a regular basis. The partnerships that brought in have been dismal. It's just not a priority. So I just don't see how it's going to work. What I would like to see on the TV side, just the last thing I'll say is on the likes of SportsCenter and your kind of sports review shows, getting esports as a regular fixture on the updates, especially for like major tournaments, that would be great.
Yeah.
That's the kind of subtle integration I could see actually having a lot of impact for the older esports fan, or at least those that are still super passionate about the sports.
Yeah.
That's a quite easy harmony that we can see, and Shaq and Rick Fox have done have done great work when they've been on those kind of shows. Rick Fox was like pushing to speak about esports when he was on a bunch of those panel shows, way before he got involved with Echo Fox. So massive props to those guys.
Yeah, for sure. It's always these years now are going to be how do we bridge the gap between, people who don't know anything about esports or that see it as, a bunch of sweaty nerds in their mom's basements, and the people who grew up without a TV or with very minimal TV. So that's what I think these years are going to be. But that's going to take us right to the end of the show, Joe. I mean, we had a ton of really great topics here. The floor is yours, sir. You can plug whatever you'd like. Any shout outs? Where can people find you? All the good stuff. The floor is yours.
Sure. First of all, dude, thank you very much for having me on. I'm always happy to talk about the business of esports. And I don't really get to do that from a specific title perspective a lot. Like a lot of the times I'm speaking with people on the Esports Roundtable podcast, which you can find on all platforms. I speak with business leaders on that about kind of the wider space. So it's always good to kind of hone in on the Overwatch League, specifically, especially as I get to go and watch the game in a few days.
I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous.
But yeah, the kind of final few things that I'll say is if anyone wants to get in touch with me, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Full name is Joe Hills. I have a pretty smug looking picture. So
yep, I've got it up on the stream. It's right over there.
Yeah, exactly.
A handsome picture.
Thank you very much. And if you guys have enjoyed the kind of insight that you've got here, I'd really love you to come check out the Esports Roundtable. We're hopefully going to be going live soon as well. But there's a bunch of other stuff that's happening with LFG at the moment, which is really exciting. We have guests from the teams. We're going to be bringing lots more people from sports and brands. So if you want to kind of lift the hood on how the business of esports is being done, then please do stop by. And yeah, like the last thing that I'll say is just a bit of advice really is like podcasts and learning more from people that are in an industry that you're passionate about, either if it's here, if it's speaking with other players, stories have been such an important part of transferring knowledge for the entire span of humanity's time in this universe. And I think whatever environment that you're in, wherever you're passionate about, listening to people that you find inspiring or is a fantastic way for you to grow. All I've done in this industry is find people that are smarter than me and just sit and be a sponge, learn what works for them and maybe what I don't like, and that's how you grow. And if you want to start working in esports, just start doing something. Yep. Start a podcast, write an article, do a post on LinkedIn, post some memes on Reddit, and you'll be in a better place than you are or where you were yesterday. I get so many people asking me, how do I get in? And that's really, you just got to start doing something. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, for sure. But again, thank you so much for being on the show, Joe. Really appreciate it. Remember, guys, make sure you check out the Esports Roundtable podcast. Maybe I'll be on one of these episodes coming up in the future.
Absolutely.
But that's going to be it, guys. Again, Joe, thank you. Remember, you can always check out all of the High Noon Hot Seat episodes on all of your favorite iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, SoundCloud, all that stuff. Screw Spotify.
Hey, we're on Spotify.
Okay,
hey.
Don't screw Spotify. Spotify's great. It's not that great. And you can also always check everything that we do at High Noon Productions over at highnoonpodcast.com. But that's going to be it, guys. Thanks for listening, and we will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Dude, thank you very much.